We are live. Lisa Shields, 34. You are the first person to join the Women's Alzheimer's Live today. You get a big shout out. You get an imaginary gold medal because you came in first. Debbie King, thank you so much. Cindy's Counter, thank you so much for joining. Alicia Foster, thank you. Laurel, Hair by Olga. Beverly Toledo, thank you for joining. We're super excited for all of you to join us today here on WHAM Live, where we talk and where the Women's Alzheimer's Movement talks to all kinds of really smart, insightful, and interesting people about how to keep our brains healthy, about the latest in medical research in Alzheimer's, on women's health and prevention. And today we're talking about the 10th anniversary of the Schreiber Report. Now that's this. This was a big game changer that came out 10 years ago today. And it's called A Woman's Nation Takes on Alzheimer's. And it was a big report to the nation that reported for the very first time that this disease disproportionately impacts women. And we did this in partnership with the Alzheimer's Association, the Center for American Progress. We worked for several years on this. Extraordinary photographs of people on the front lines of this disease all through this report, which is really an extraordinary report, if I do say so myself. We look at researchers and family members and all kinds of things. And so we thought we would mark today by talking with the Chief Science Officer for the Alzheimer's Association, which is Dr. Maria Carrillo, because they were our partners, and they still in many ways are our partners, as we are both trying to find a cure for Alzheimer's. We are both out there on the front lines, and they are the largest non-government funder of Alzheimer's research, and we work really hand in hand. And Maria and I have done many events together. We have done with the Alzheimer's Association many projects together. And as I said, I have testified with them in Washington, D.C. and believe 100% in what they're doing. And they have been incredibly supportive of the Women's Alzheimer's Movement and our quest to understand how this disease disproportionately impacts women and what we can learn, what we need to know, what we have learned. So we thought this would be a great time to kind of get together, join forces, and come together and talk about what we've learned in these last 10 years, what we know now that we didn't know 10 years ago, and where we need to go so that all of our families can live better, brain-healthy lives, that they can access help where they need it, and that people know what they need to know when they need to know it. So if you're interested in this subject, also WHAM is having a big Women's Health Summit at the end of the month. The information is in the link in the bio here. I'll remind you of that after we've spoken with Dr. Carrillo. And if you're interested, this Schreiber Report is still online. You can actually go and read it. And it's really very moving. About different families sharing their journeys, families of color, because Alzheimer's disproportionately impacts families of color, including obviously women. So there's so many incredible stories here. And here is the Alzheimer's Association. Dr. Carrillo is coming to us from the Alzheimer's account. And so after I just talked about all of that and how great the Alzheimer's Association has been to the Women's Alzheimer's. There she is. Hi, Dr. Carrillo. How are you?
Hey, Maria. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Two Marias talking to each other. Look at that.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for highlighting this topic again.
Well, I was saying before you came on, job of leading the Alzheimer's Association, obviously with Harry Johns, and looking at all of the different ways that we can get information and fund research, and that we have been partners for many years. And what do you think, if we back up and from 10 years ago to today, when this report came out saying to the nation that Alzheimer's disproportionately impacts women, how has that changed the narrative? How did that get people's attention? How has it impacted how we look at Alzheimer's?
Yeah, thank you so much for highlighting this and celebrating this 10-year anniversary, because I consider that moment 10 years ago when the book was published a seminal moment for women. And that, led by you, by your team, by us, just so exciting to be a part of that and partner with you, because since then, I tell you, the game has changed. And so today, we are talking beyond the age difference, perhaps, between men and women, the age difference that perhaps could be attributing, or we could attribute this difference between the disproportionate amount of women, that 2/3 of the individuals impacted by Alzheimer's, the Alzheimer's diagnosis, are in fact women, the fact that 2/3 of over 15 million caregivers are women.
Yeah.
So our book essentially put this on the map and has led to extraordinary opportunities and work that we've been able to do together in much part, as you have already mentioned. So really a seminal moment for us.
So we've learned that in these last 10 years. What advances do you think we've made in studying women or helping women understand how their brains differ from men?
Well, the important thing is that first we put a stake in the ground, and we made that statement very ably in this book.
Right.
Then it really was about going after the questions of, if it's not just age, what is it?
Right.
Is it biology? Is it genetics? Is it hormonal? Is it just that our brains are wired differently and we behave differently all through life? So what we then did, which we then also funded many grants through with together, of course, is to launch a think tank where we brought experts from around the country, including the federal government, to talk about what the current evidence looked like and where there were gaps, where we were missing evidence on why this impact was so disproportionate between men and women. And so that's where our SAGA grants, our sex and gender awards, came in. And that's where we started really specifically funding the necessary research that we need in order to make more definitive statements. Much of that we've done together.
Yeah, you just mentioned hormones. That's the big H, so to speak, when you talk to women who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. And women, by the big study many years ago, were kind of scared off of hormones, now being told that hormones are neuroprotectors and actually are good for brain health. When you actually start taking hormones is the critical piece of this conversation. What light can you shed on this whole hormone discussion and brain health, Dr. Carrillo?
Right, very important discussion, because as we all know, as we age, these things change. A lot changes in our bodies. Yeah. And but hormone therapy, I think in a way has really been challenging for us, because several studies have reported different findings.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to make sense of all of it, I think. First and foremost, I have to say that if you are considering hormone replacement therapy or you're on hormone replacement therapy, you want to think about what that really means for you, your risk of dementia, your risk of breast cancer, for example. Important to talk to your clinician. But let me tell you a little bit, Maria, about sort of the maybe sometimes contradictory research that's out there.
Yeah.
A very large study that was really observational, followed women for over 10 years and really found an association between, hormone replacement therapy and an increased risk in Alzheimer's. But that study was observational. That means that it just followed them. There wasn't any causality linking those two together. So we have to interpret that very cautiously. Other studies have actually found that the hormone therapy can be protective of Alzheimer's. And again, depending on when you take it, right? Is it when you're already postmenopausal? Is it in perimenopause? So very difficult to interpret. But today, the thing we do know is that it's important to recognize that the risk of Alzheimer's dementia, in terms of the research we have, still does not, to us and to, of course, the National Menopause Society, mean that it outweighs the risk of not taking them if you need them. So that's important. And again, all of this has to be discussed with your clinician.
Right. So many women that I speak to all over the country, really all over the world, say they talk to their clinicians and their clinicians go, we really don't know. So therefore, we kind of leave it up to you to decide. Here's the pros, here's the cons.
Right.
And then women come out going like, I'm not a doctor. I don't know. I don't want to risk my health, but I don't want to get dementia. So what do I do? So women often feel, I find, and I can put myself in this category, women in their 50s and 60s feel like they're in the Wild West out there when it comes to their health.
That, you know, that is very true. If clinicians don't really understand the research, they're not going to give you the right answers. And that is unfortunate. Today, though, there is more evidence that lean towards telling you you're protecting yourself from cancers. So that is a more immediate issue. And there are lots of other things that we can try to do in our life that I know you wrap your arms around and really tout, that we can try to do to continue to reduce our risk of dementia later. And we can certainly talk about that too.
Yeah, so that probably brings you to the Pointer study, right? And so kind of what we're trying to look at in this country. When I got involved in the Alzheimer's space, there was very little evidence, very little conversation about lifestyle, about what you actually could do, which made people feel, I think, hopeless and powerless. Now there's a lot about lifestyle, what you can do in your day-to-day life that can help you perhaps delay dementia, Alzheimer's several years out. What's encouraging to you about lifestyle and Alzheimer's?
I think the most encouraging thing is that we saw that, and I'd say that's two things. The first is that we saw results from the Sprint Mind study in the United States, like 60,000 people who reduced their blood pressure down to 120. And over the 5 years that they were followed, these individuals experienced a significant decline in mild cognitive impairment, and maybe a not so significant, but still pretty impressive decline in actual dementia. That was impressive. So that's heart health, okay? Right. And it was just with a pill. Now even with changing your life and running, exercising, diet. The other piece of hope was the finger study 10 years ago, actually. 1,600 people who followed a protocol of doing 4 different things: physical activity, cognitive engagement, heart health, of course, but also nutrition. They followed the Nordic diet. They found almost a 30% reduction in cognitive decline as those people aged, and all those individuals were at risk for dementia. So those two things combined really led us to lead the Pointer study. It's a $100 million study here in the United States to see if we could mimic the Finns, who we don't live that life, of course, Maria, as you know, but how close can we get? So that's really the trick.
So people always, you talked about the Nordic diet. People ask me all the time, like, I'm supposed to be following a plant diet, I'm on a keto diet, I'm on a paleo diet, I'm on a Mediterranean diet. What should I be doing? I'm exercising, I'm trying to meditate, I'm monitoring my sleep, I'm trying to be socially interactive and engaged. Yeah. The Nordic diet?
Right. That's what I said. The Nordic diet. I mean, what is that? It's a lot of cold herring. But, you know, can we really do that in Chicago? Can we really do that in different parts of this country? In Chicago, I'm like lamb-licked. I got a fresh lake right here, so that's not going to work for me. So what we were trying to do is to implement this in the United States with something that's actually reachable. It's doable. So we're using the Mind diet. And the Mind diet, there's a lot of great research on it. And so that's the one we committed to that we think is the most accessible in this country. We are really, trying to create that recipe because, so many people ask you, Maria, so many people ask me, Maria, what exactly should I be doing to reduce my risk? I want to know too, but we don't have the hard evidence to give anyone a specific recommendation. And that's why I'm proud that the Alzheimer's Association launched this study. I want that. Every time I talk to somebody, they ask me that question. I just don't have that recipe right now. But we're going to have it in a few years.
And when are we going to have it, do you think?
I think it'll be about 4 years because we're following 2,000 people around this country for 2 years. So we're still enrolling right now. We're enrolling. We only have about 450 people enrolled.
Okay, so you need more people. If people are interested, they want to be a part of this, how do they enroll themselves in this study?
Well, they should go into alz.org and look for the U.S. Pointer study. There's actually a link there for information because we're in 5 parts of the country only. So I'm not in every single city. I can tell you we're in Northern California, we're in Western North Carolina, we're in Houston, Texas, we are in Chicagoland, some parts of Michigan, and we're in Rhode Island and Boston, New Hampshire areas.
But I think so you can go on, as Maria just said, you can go on to Alzheimer's Association.org, find out where the study is being done. They need volunteers, but you can also learn about what the study is tracking and start to try to implement some of those things
Correct.
in your day-to-day life as it is right now. Dr. Carrillo, so many people come up to me all the time and they say, I think my mom or I think my dad might have Alzheimer's, but I'm not sure. What do I do? How do you answer that?
That's just a very classic question as well. And, you know, I had that question myself when about 10 or 11 years ago now, my mother-in-law was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but for 3 years I had been suspicious that she was exhibiting changes. And when I shared this with my husband's family and with my husband, they really shut that down right away. They don't want to think that that could happen to them. And I understand completely. So I had to stay silent and watch it happening. Because
stay silent. If you, the chief scientific officer of the Alzheimer's Association, could not break through, if you found yourself having to be
exactly. Imagine how difficult these conversations are. It's so difficult because we don't want to think our loved ones are exhibiting frightening. I mean, that is a scary thing. So, but the first thing is to really notice, and that I noticed, were difficulty in finding words that were very common. A hairbrush, right? Difficulty in finding the word for toothbrush, having to use actions to make it up. A difficulty in actually remembering that you just met someone, or you just walked in a room and saw someone. Now you walk out and same thing. First time you're seeing that person and it's actually not. Repeating things over and over, the same stories, repeating things over and over. Those are symptoms. And of course at ALZ.org, you've got 10 signs that we actually tell you about, because, you know, a lot of times as we age, we're tired, we're stressed, we forget stuff, we didn't sleep well, you know, and you get tired and you make these mistakes. So we have a great website that'll tell you what's concerning and what's not.
One of the things that came out last time, I think we saw each other here in Los Angeles about a year ago, is we found out different information about how women take these cognitive tests compared to men, and that women are actually better at the kind of verbal end of the tests, the memory part of the test, which might actually prevent them from being diagnosed early enough. What changes have been done regarding these tests? What have we learned from that?
Well, that research came out in 2018, and we had a great conversation about that, because it's so important to recognize that it is proven that women are more verbal and do better in testing. And where this comes into play, of course, outside of school and other things like that, is really in the doctor's office, where you're given a clinical test, you're given a paper and pencil test, and women score higher. What does that mean? It means that women and men with the same level of impairment, actually women then will not be detected because they're scoring so well that their docs think they're actually fine. So that is an issue that we have elevated to clinicians around the country. But one more thing will happen. Pretty soon, the Alzheimer's Association, which has worked on for 2 years now on clinical practice guidelines, will be ready to roll out. We're just getting ready to publish them. And we'll be working with clinicians, from nurse practitioners all the way up to those specialists, those neurologists, so that we can send a message on how you diagnose and include those important pieces of information that clinicians need to consider.
Now, when do you think that'll be available? Because I hear all the time about people being misdiagnosed, not being diagnosed, losing time, not even wanting to go get diagnosed.
Right now, we're working with a journal, so I can't mention which one, on publishing them. So they are written. They've gone through a 2-year of a very complex consensus process. The leaders are Drs. Ali Atri and Drs. Brad Dickerson, along with the Alzheimer's Association that sponsored this. And so we're hoping that if we can get that submitted in the next month, then it depends on the journal, but I'm hoping that by the end of this calendar year.
So we've heard a lot about COVID disproportionately impacting people with Alzheimer's, people in memory care facilities. We've heard people who've gotten COVID, who have been younger, complaining about neurological symptoms that have stayed with them, brain fog. Are you learning anything about the connection between these two diseases, and what can you tell us?
So I think there's a couple of things to separate there. We are learning quite a bit about, that foggy brain
Yeah.
syndrome that people experience after an active COVID infection, right? Because there are, people that certainly are positive, but they are asymptomatic. So when you are symptomatic with COVID and your symptoms resolve, it appears that there are still these brain or neurologic related symptoms that tend to last for up to 6 months, sometimes a year, in what we have already seen, because we know that there are individuals that tested positive, had symptoms back in January, and are still now having these foggy brain issues.
Right.
So the question is, what is going on? And we know that during an active infection, there's delirium, there's headaches, there's the lack of sense of smell. All of these actually are brain impacting, right? The virus impacting the brain. So that's a separate issue that we absolutely need to find out. And we know that also COVID impacts those over 65 the most of all. And actually it's the deadliest in that population. So those are people who are actually also more at risk of having dementia, but maybe also have comorbid conditions, these other diseases that elevate your risk of getting COVID. So we also then have to think about, what does this mean for somebody with dementia? Does it also worsen their dementia? Does it accelerate the progress of decline? So these are questions that need to be asked. One of the things we just announced in July at our Alzheimer's Association's International Conference, which of course went virtual like everything else, was that we have a 25-country study that we've initiated, so that everyone that comes in over 65 with a positive COVID test and symptomatic is going to get tested over the next year and a half. We're going to bring them back every 6 months to get cognitive and behavioral testing to see if we can tease out what is happening and actually correlate it with the level of antibodies they have, with their blood tests and other markers, so that we can understand what this means. We're all going to be living with this type of analysis in every research study from here on out.
So if people are listening to this and they have a loved one in a memory care facility right now, right? What's your best advice to them, whether there have been people in that facility who've had COVID, whether they've not been allowed to get in, they're worried about a parent getting COVID, they're worried about maybe their parent had Alzheimer's, but they don't even know whether they had COVID. What's your best advice to family members so concerned about this?
Well, this is such a tricky time for us who have loved ones in a facility or in a memory care center or a residential type of living situation. There is no doubt that they are the most vulnerable in this country. Now, we have already sent statements to Congress asking them to create these protections for people who are living in these situations. But what can we do now?
Yeah.
Well, certainly be in very close touch with those facilities. There are people who have been designated as the power of attorney, or the person who is the contact and the conduit for information. If you can't visit, we encourage you being in contact with the head nurse or whoever it is that you're in contact with. We encourage people to do video chats if they can. Some people can't; they might be too advanced. Or encourage the center to read or help them watch the right television that they enjoy, or the right music that they like, that they can still connect with, to help them feel like they're engaging in life. So very important to just be in contact with that facility.
Yeah, so many people come up to me and say, oh, I have a parent in a facility. Can you call the facility and tell them X, Y, and Z? And I'm always trying to encourage people, you pay the bill.
That's right.
The power to call up and do many of the things that Dr. Carrillo was just mentioning. You have input on the food that is being served in a memory care facility, the programs that are being offered, what is happening with your loved one. Remember, you are paying the bill to have your loved one there, therefore you have a say in how your loved one is treated. I think that's really, when I've often mentioned that to people, they kind of are taken aback. They're like, oh yeah, you're right. I didn't really kind of think I had that power for some reason. So I think that's a really important thing to remember. So Dr. Carrillo, if 10 years ago, the big gap, the big story was women, what's the big gap today? Is it still women? Is it still, we have to understand the why about women and that will lead us down a different road? Or is there something else that's kind of hiding under a rock and we're not seeing, not thinking about, haven't looked at?
Yeah, so those are great questions. And I think we are still following our awardees of the grants. Many of them have actually gone on to get additional funding, so their projects were actually very worthwhile. And our federal government, the National Institute on Aging, has jumped on board and has created women, sex, and gender as an elevated topic for research. That's fantastic. So that's a win, and that's something that we started 10 years ago. So thank you very much. But what else is there? You know, one of the most recent studies has shown us that actually the way women accumulate those proteins associated with Alzheimer's, in particular those tau tangles, yes, that is fascinating. And I think that needs to be studied much more intensely, that difference. Why do women accumulate more and in different places? So I think that's something that is a bit of a gap right now, and I'm hopeful that that will be studied in the near future.
More study on menopause?
I think we always need more study on understanding hormones, right? And you know that Dr. Robbie Britton-Diaz, which you funded, we've co-funded, is doing a lot of great work on how we can actually use hormones as a treatment, right? So that's fascinating. But we do need to really understand what hormone related therapies, for example, are going to be impacting us as women start to continue to move in through those ages of highest risk, not only for breast cancer then, but as they leave that, highest risk for Alzheimer's.
So finally, and this is the last question, and you and I have both been kind of out there talking about Alzheimer's, talking about dementia, talking about the disproportionate impact on women and communities of color, and talking about the importance of prioritizing brain health. I myself have found it frustrating to talk about brain health because people are like, I can't see my brain. I don't really know what brain health is. How do you describe focusing on brain health, focusing on something that we can't see, that we take for granted until it just doesn't work anymore?
So that's a great question. And so I actually refer to this, instead of brain health, as risk reduction for Alzheimer's and or dementia. Because risk reduction, we understand more. We know that if you lower your cholesterol, you're reducing your risk of a heart attack. We know that if you lower your blood pressure, you are reducing your risk of a stroke. And so we have to really think of action, how people can take action instead of just thinking about something that is a bit abstract. You're absolutely right. So we think of it as risk reduction. What can we do? And when I think about that, the key tenets are going to be nutrition and exercise. Of course, it's important to keep learning, always keep your brain active, no doubt. It's important to socialize, get out there and exercise your brain while you're socializing. That's why we like to socialize, that's good. But exercise and nutrition and watching that heart health is going to be critical because it can reduce your risk. So we've had conversations with authors, actually even today, of the Lancet report, which came out 2 years ago, but then again this year, stating that over 40% of dementia worldwide was actually modifiable through these risk reduction mitigation strategies.
Pause a second on that. That's a huge kind of headline, right?
Correct.
40% of world dementia cases are modifiable,
correct,
aka possibly preventable.
Can be reduced.
Can be reduced.
That's correct.
Delayed. So that is a very hopeful, empowering concept, idea. It also does not mean that if you have a loved one who had Alzheimer's, has Alzheimer's, that they did something wrong. I always like to say that because people say to me,
does not mean that at all.
And I don't want to feel like I brought it on myself by eating animal crackers. That's me. But, you know, there are things like Dr. Carrillo was just mentioning that are in our power. Reducing our blood pressure, taking care of our heart health, exercising, eating the best way we can. Many of us have complicated relationships with food, and women in general do that. But I think taking small steps every day, if you just think about modifiable or preventable, that's huge. And we didn't know that.
Very big message. And this is something that is, again, more action oriented. And we can grasp that because we've known about reducing risk for decades now for heart. And so I think that that's something that as a message that we can send out that maybe people can wrap their arms more about.
So are you hopeful, Dr. Carrillo? Do you feel enthusiastic?
I will tell you that I've been at the Alzheimer's Association, well, as you know, Maria, for 16 years now. And I have never been more hopeful. There is so much knowledge that we are acquiring to date. Now, the only thing I will say is that just because we reduce dementia risk doesn't mean it's directly related yet to Alzheimer's. So that's why, again, the U.S. Pointer study is going to help us because we are embedding in this risk reduction strategy that we're using in this Pointer study, we're embedding amyloid beta markers and tau markers to see if we can make a correlation with Alzheimer's as well. So important to separate these things out. But wow, I mean, the fact that we're here doing this study, really, I mean, remember where we were before, where it's just very, very light touches on nutrition and exercise. Now we have more focus, okay? This is a different place.
This is a different place. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. And
Thank goodness.
5-10 years we'll be in a different place too. So
Agreed.
Dr. Maria Carrillo, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your partnership here on
Fantastic.
the Schreiber Report. 10 years ago, this came out. It rocked many people's world, and today you don't meet anybody who doesn't cite it, who doesn't talk about women, and so I think that is really great progress and something we can both be really, really happy about. So
absolutely, and congratulations.
Congratulations to you too, and thank you, and I'll see you along the trail.
See you along the trail, absolutely.
Thank you. So that is Dr. Maria Carrillo, who is the Chief Scientific Officer for the Alzheimer's Association. As I said in the beginning, they have been a wonderful partner for the women's Alzheimer's movement. If you're interested in what she was talking about, please join us at the WHAM Summit. You can go into the link in the bio, find out all the information. We'll be talking to caregivers. We'll be talking to caregivers of all ages. We'll be talking with people with Alzheimer's living with this disease. We'll be talking to researchers about what's new on the horizon when it comes to women and Alzheimer's and dementia. We'll be issuing our new guide that you can take to your doctor's office that will tell you the questions to ask, which is always a really helpful thing to have. And so this will be the second time we're doing a big WHAM summit. The first one was incredibly successful, so we're back with another one. And we hope you'll join us. It's an hour chock full of information, inspiration, and empowerment for your mind and your body. So grab a couple friends, get a drink, join us, and you'll learn something. And you'll actually learn stuff that you can actually implement in your life. So that's always the best kind of thing to learn. So thank you so much. Great day for the Schreiber Report. I want to thank everybody who worked on this report, the Center for American Progress, the Alzheimer's Association, the entire Schreiber Report team led by Karen Skelton, Aaron Stein, and so many others, Barbara Kinney, who led all the photographers. There's a whole bookload of people who worked on this. Sandy Gleistein, Sydney Wiener, she's here. She didn't work on it, but she still deserves to be thanked. And all of you who have supported the women's Alzheimer's movement. These have been difficult days for nonprofits all over the world. And so many of you have stepped up with contributions that have made such an impact on the women's Alzheimer's movement. $5, $10, $15. I want you to know it's kept us going. It's kept us motivated. It's kept us inspired. And I really want to thank you so much for believing in our work, for trusting our work. We're funding research that we hope will make a difference in your life and in the lives of people that you love. And we're pushing the needle. It's an uphill battle, but we're doing it with your support. So thank you so much for joining us today. And again, thank you to Dr. Carrillo. See you later. Bye-bye.